Hello, my name is Natasha Cañedo, and I am presenting my final project for the Managing and Leading Organizations. So just before we get into everything, I'm going to go into a quick overview about what I'll be discussing in this presentation. So first, I'll be going into an introduction about who I interviewed. Then I'll be talking about understanding the resistance to change, and then changing organizational structure and design, the SCARF model, equity theory, and then the conclusion. So to begin, I decided to interview Jonathan Bellows. He is a manager at Old Navy, and he manages between 30 to 50 people depending on the time of year. So this would mean on days that it's more like Black Friday or during Christmas time, he's going to have a lot more employees working under him and overseeing a lot more people because it is more demand. A lot of people are shopping during that time. So he does have a leadership on top of that, which include four leaders, and they're all at different levels that he is managing and guiding as well. So to begin with, I wanted to address understanding the resistance to change. And I asked him, how can managers effectively manage resistance to change while implementing organizational change? So in the textbook, it says employees are often feeling different feelings when change arises. So they feel threatened self-interest, different perceptions, and feelings of loss. So Jonathan said to be able to address this, there's really a two-step process. So the first step addresses more of the employees. So employees, when this change arises, they are nervous about their day-to-day, what that's going to look like, what this means to them. So Jonathan is really focused on making sure that when this change happens, how can he be able to be as open and as honest as he can about this change occurring? He noticed that there is actually more resistance to change within his employees compared to his leadership team, which is the second step. So the second step for his leadership team is telling them, look, we are going to make this decisions. Here's why I made this decision. And he found that there's actually less resistance within that team, and it's quicker to be able to implement those because of the fact that they are coming from more of the understanding that there is change that is going to be happening and that needs to be occurring. So then, secondly, I wanted to also address changing organizational structure and design. So I asked him, well, how can leaders effectively communicate the need for change and inspire buy-in from employees? So Jonathan has actually gone to three different Old Navy locations, all experiencing three different experiences because you are working with different people. So in the textbook, it says organizations may change management, they may change reporting systems, and changes in overall culture. So Jonathan had pointed out that it's really important as a manager to pick and choose your battles. So one thing that he mentioned was he would change something as little as he created a little office area where all their supplies would go. And for him, he had said that it really didn't make that big of a difference. But when his employees noticed that that change was happening, they were actually really upset about it because there are certain ways that change is being implemented, and there are certain ways that employees, before the change is implemented, have been able to function and what they're used to. So at this new store, they had really liked their general manager, their previous one before Jonathan came in. So he noticed, he's like, well, something as little as pens, even though it's small and I prefer this, he found that it was actually better to just let them keep some of those things that they found safety and comfort in, because he realized that there are other things that he would be rather changing compared to something as little as where the supplies are going. So then that brings us to the next point of little change varies in perspective. So we had talked a lot about in our simulations that when you come into a new management role, it's really important to be able to start with small changes. And I had mentioned that to Jonathan, but Jonathan had pointed out, well, even though it's a small change, that varies on perspective, and that employees, these little things such as pens, these are things that people have been doing every single day, even before you had gone there. And so even though it seems very small and not that much of an importance to the manager, it is really important to understand that people are coming from different perspectives of what it means to be small, to what it means to implement small changes, and to understand, okay, again, sometimes you have to kind of put whatever it is that you want to implement, if it's not that big, on the side, and then allow them to have their thing that they find comfort and routine in. And then he said also having an empathetic approach. So understanding that it is really hard to be adjusting from manager to manager, but also coming with the understanding that at the end of the day, the organization is the same and the goals of the company are the same. So the only thing that changes is just the way that they operate daily in terms of what a manager expects day to day, and that just is going to vary because every manager is going to be different. So just understanding and being flexible with your employees is a really great way to be able to um, get that buy-in. And then just acknowledging that change is happening. So just being upfront with your employees is really important. Jonathan said that it was one of his big things about saying, like, letting them know, well, yes, this is happening, but instead, what if he found that by letting everyone know, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing and implementing. What are your thoughts? What do you feel about this happening? And he noticed that it caused a lot more people to become aligned with that goal. And it helped people understand better what was happening. Um, and he said that people don't necessarily need to agree, but at least they know that it's happening, and that's what's really important. So then, as I was interviewing Jonathan, I had mentioned the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model, and then he had actually mentioned the SCARF model. So this is a model that he oftentimes refers to and definitely uses as the core model to his management, and managing and leadership style. So I asked him, I said, well, how do you balance employee motivation to ensure that they are being productive rather than attempt to do as little as possible? And what this model suggests is there's the status, certainty, autonomy, and relatedness and fairness. So those five things are something that all managers need to consider. And one thing that Jonathan had really kind of honed in on is the certainty of change and or the continuity of in changes. So just understanding and being supported through these changes are a really big factor for employees to be able to feel safe and honestly motivate them. And then another thing is situational leadership. So Jonathan said that one of the people that he always remembers about is that there is this employee that does not like confrontation. Anytime that he confronts them, they just break down in tears. So what Jonathan found was that by restructuring the way that he addressed problems, was able to actually help the employee come to a solution. So this employee, rather than saying, hey, you did XYZ wrong, what Jonathan would do is ask the employee, well, why do you feel like it was okay to turn off the lights or turn off the music before we actually closed? And the employee ends up, it basically allowed the employee to come to the solution and see why they were in the wrong and what they did was wrong on their own terms, rather than someone being directly at them and kind of feel like it was they're feeling bombarded. So And one thing that Jonathan was able to understand from that was that this employee actually just didn't understand that the company's expectations were to keep the music or the lights on. And so Jonathan realized, okay, well, this is most likely then a higher up issue, and that all this really means is we need to be clear about the expectations for employees so that they understand that the lights or the music need to be playing as long as their doors are open. And we were talking about how that really helps employees feel safe. They feel comfortable being able to be themselves and also understand that if they are going to make a mistake, rather than have a negative reinforcement, they're having the security and they have certainty in their leadership that whatever it is that's happening, that it'll be addressed and that they can move on in a good manner, in a healthy manner as well. And then we also talked about the equity theory. So I asked, does your organization create team/individual goals with incentives to reach company goals? And do you find this theory applicable? So the theory is people are motivated to seek social equity in the rewards they receive for performance. So at Old Navy, Jonathan had mentioned that they have a goal to hit a certain amount of enrollments in their loyalty program. And every time that their employees hit this goal, they get points to be able to shop in their marketplace. So they get really cool stuff like blenders, like cool technology, whatever it is, all this stuff. They get it as a reward and as incentives to be able to hit their points. Now, where it does fall short is that Jonathan had mentioned that all the people above him give him different goals. So he told me that his boss will give him a goal of hitting 105% of that enrollment. Or the company itself, the organization Old Navy, gives a standard base of 110%. So what he says that it's really important for him to do is to be able to find that medium. He tries to narrow down and find, okay, what is going to be the goal that I know that my store can address and can hit it and attain, and then whatever we exceed is what we exceed, and it's really great and we did really awesome. But then also making sure that it's not too low that he is getting in trouble. So I was reading this journal that had talked a lot about that it's really important for managers to be able to do this and to be able to understand that when you have goals too high, that it actually lessens the amount that you're going to hit this goal. Whereas if you have an attainable goal, it actually increases the amount that workers are going to be hitting. And I asked him, I said, well, do you let your employees know that this goal is constantly changing? And he said no. He said it's really important that his employees are only getting one thing, and that he said that he has to focus on narrowing it down and simplifying it as much as possible so that his employees aren't getting mixed signals. So, in conclusion, I used chapter 11, which was the meaning of leadership, and I narrowed it down to this, which was leadership influences the shape of organization's goals. And that just goes back to what I was saying in the previous slide, was that Jonathan has to have the ability to take all this information from the company, from his bosses, and really narrow it down to understand, okay, what are the true problems that we need to address now? And then secondly, leaders influence the behaviors of others without using force. So going back to the example of Jonathan supporting the person that didn't like to directly be talked to when they were addressing a problem, and using that as a stepping stone to understand that employees are not the same, people are not the same. So how, as a leader, can you use that and be able to create good behaviors and lead good behaviors? And then Also, leaders adapt to the needs of their employees. So exactly what I was saying. Creating a safe environment and understanding some people like to be directly addressed, some people don't, but then also remembering that you are creating a safe environment for them to be able to work in. And then leaders learn how to create a safe environment for their employees, which I just said. And then leaders are honest but help guide their employees. So back to the first slide, just being upfront that yes, there is change that's happening. Yes, it is uncomfortable and yes, it's different, but it's nothing that you can't get through as long as a leadership team and as employees, you are actively trying to help everyone come to find a common goal, which is what Jonathan would do by um being honest and upfront about the changes being made, ask them for for any feedback, and then at least find alignment within that. And here are my references. So thank you so much for listening.